Victorians will be charged a new tax to raise up to $1 billion a year to fund a major overhaul of the state's mental health services. Premier Daniel Andrews is backing the plan after it was recommended by a royal commission. Mental illness costs the state up to $14.2 billion a year. But data has revealed adequate care is not being provided for more than half of the severe cases. The government is yet to decide how the money will be levied, but options include charges added to motor vehicle registrations. And joining me now live is Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews. Good morning to you, Premier. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. So when this report came out, how surprised were you that the state was so undercooked when it came to funding for mental health?
Look, Peter, we had a really very keen sense of just how bad the system was. That's why we, in the election last year, committed to have Australia's first Royal Commission into our mental health system to lay the failures of the system bare and to shine a really powerful light on those failures and the cost of a system that just doesn't work. What the report shows us, and it does make for harrowing reading, there's 105,000 Victorians who need specialist mental health care and they're not getting it. There are so many people, so many families, and you get a sense of this. All of us have got a story. All of us know someone. All of us ourselves are directly impacted by a system that it just doesn't work. It's broken. It needs to be fixed. We need to take mental health seriously, and that's exactly what the Royal Commission's about, and it's what our response to it's about. Every recommendation will be delivered. Not easy, not cheap. It won't be quick either, but we've just got to get this done.
OK, I know that the Commission has only just finished, but what can you tell me about how Victorians will be taxed? How is that going to be arranged?
Well, one of those recommendations yesterday from the interim report, the final report will be in October next year, is that we have a new charge, a new levy, a new dedicated source of funding so we can fund new effort. So 100% of any additional funding that we raise would go towards the reform process. More beds, better services, wrapping services around people, not just when they're in crisis and really unwell, but right throughout the journey. We're going to spend the next couple of months, senior ministers, working through all the different options we have, and there are lots of different options, but we're not going to be able to invest more and change the system unless we have dedicated funding. So we'll have more to say in the early part of next year. And Peter, this will be a really significant part of the state budget in May next year.
OK, so but what can you tell me at all? What some of the options that you are looking at? We just mentioned that perhaps registration for motor vehicles might be where people are taxed.
Sure. Well, the Royal Commission has not been totally prescriptive. They haven't told us exactly how we should do this, just that we should have that dedicated source of revenue. But their examples, not mine, but their examples related to, we have a fire services property levy that's levied on homes. There's TAC payments around road safety, motor rego. There's a lot of different options. We'll be very careful, very thoughtful in terms of how we design this. It needs to be fair. It needs to have some regard to a person's capacity to pay. We're not looking to make life more difficult for those who are doing it tough, but if you're going to do new things, if we're going to do more, if we're going to do better, then there needs to be that dedicated funding, and 100% of it needs to go towards a much better mental health system that supports people instead of tragically failing them.
Premier, it can't be fixed. Not all of mental health can be fixed. I mean, it's just so broad. It affects so many people. We've got another story today about mental health affecting our veterans, which is nothing new. It's been around for a long time. But what particular area or what part of mental health do you believe you can make significant inroads to?
I think that it's very difficult to hone in just on one area, but if you bear with me. Specialist care, so care for those who are the most unwell, there are massive gaps, and people are not getting admitted into a bed. They're not getting that specialist treatment, and that puts lives at risk, and in fact it has cost lives. But across the whole system, from early intervention, identifying problems, dealing with stigma, giving people the confidence to come forward, and then providing them with care, not just at the back end when they are in crisis, but continuous care and support. And when I say them, not just the patient, but indeed the people who love them the most, their family, their carers. We've got to support families to get the care they need, not just when they're in crisis, but right throughout, as well as not just those most acute mental illnesses. There are many other people who are living and their life is forever changed by not getting care for less serious issues But if they're not treated, if they're not supported, they can develop into much, much bigger problems.
Yeah.
They hold those individuals back, and ultimately they hold all of us back.
Premier, you did mention yesterday that all of us are touched by mental health, and that is true. I'm just wondering, you can answer this question or not. How has it affected you, if at all, personally?
Oh, look, in my own family, there are examples of people who needed care and didn't get that care. One moment last year, and this really sealed it for me that we needed to call it out and have a Royal Commission, some kids at our children's schools took their own lives. And when you get emails, when you're having a conversation with your kids about what's happened within their peer group, within their school community, that really does bring home just how much we have to do. And I just don't think that shuffling money around or pretending that tinkering can fix this is what the Victorian community needs. We said we'd have that overarching review, a Royal Commission, never happened before in the country. And as I said to you before, it won't be cheap, it won't be easy, it won't be quick, but every bit of this work will be worthwhile because I think it will save lives.
Just a quick couple of issues to wrap up, Premier. Victoria, as you know, the only Australian state to sign up to China's Belt and Road Initiative. I'm just wondering, following the events of this week, how can you trust China as a business partner?
Well, the Chinese partnership has existed for a long time with our state, but it's certainly entered into, I think, a really important phase in the last 5 years. We've doubled our exports, we've got more direct foreign investment, we've got the best part of 30,000 additional students studying in Melbourne. This is great for Victorian jobs. Doesn't mean we agree with China on every issue, and certainly we work with our national security partners. Those matters are very much for the federal government, but we're briefed regularly, we work closely with them, and you know, we don't want to see our democratic process undermined by anybody. And I don't think that our trade partnership, our cultural partnership, the fact that we're working so hard to grow jobs here in Victoria in any way negatively impacts the national interest. The Victorian interest as the strongest and fastest growing economy very much is the national interest. I think our national economy would be in a very different place if it weren't for the work that we're doing here in Victoria, and indeed Gladys is doing up in New South Wales.
I think that your export dollars have increased from about $6 billion to $10 billion, but I'm wondering, does your government have sufficient foreign policy experience to be able to control political interference when it comes to Belt and Road deals?
Well, in terms of political interference, that's a matter for the federal government, and we fully support them taking whatever action they deem appropriate. Belt and Road is about much more than Victoria working in third-party countries. It's very much about wine and beef and international students and building infrastructure right here in Victoria and indeed in China. The most recent agreement we signed, the Chinese came to us and said, we've got an aged care problem. We think you do it well. We'd like you to come and help us build lots of aged care facilities in China. That's not a matter of foreign interference. That's investment, it's jobs, it's securing Victoria's future. The other matters are very important. They're principally for the federal government, and we work very closely with the federal government on each of them.
I know it was a federal vote, but were you surprised that the union-busting bill didn't get through?
Well, look, Senate politics, much like upper house politics here in Victoria, you can never be surprised. I don't pretend to be a commentator on the upper house in my state. They do things very differently there, and it seems the Senate is exactly the same.
All right, Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews, really appreciate your time this morning. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks very much.